I wish I've learned the importance of what playing music really is about from the beginning. Do you know this feeling of playing a jazz line and it sounds like okay, but it's not really there? That feel that something is off, but it's not the notes, but what is it then? I strongly believe that if I've learned these 3 skills that I'm going to talk about in this video earlier in my playing life, the road to practicing and playing music would have been much more clear for me. And I promise you, learning these 3 things will make a clear connection between you, your instrument and your music. And developing these strong habits from the beginning will save you thousands of hours of practice and frustration. So how can I save 3,000 hours of practice? Having this question in mind leads us to this. Change the focus from the notes you play into the way you play the notes. Let's get going on the first very important skill. Understanding and learning phrasing from the beginning is essential. So why do I put phrasing first? Because everything you practice and you play needs to be played and practiced with music in mind. When you start adding phrasing to your lines, you add details. This turns the notes into music. And music is not at all about the notes you play, but the meaning of the notes you play. Try playing this note only thinking of the notes. This becomes a very nice execution of the notes, but only the notes. Then try adding a little bit of intensity into the lines ascending and a little bit less intensity to the lines descending. A little jump into classical music. In classical music, most lines are written down. This means that somebody already thought about how the music should sound, how the expression should be. When you listen to classical music, you can easily hear how the tension moves up and down. This makes the line so much more interesting to listen to because the line gets a direction. As a general rule, you can say that ascending line gets more tension and descending lines get less tension. Now switching from classical music into improvised lines. When you're playing improvised lines, you improvise, so you make the lines up. This means that in your head you need to have all the aspects of the line already sounding great. You must have a clear definition of the sound you're playing in your mind before you're playing it, because afterwards you cannot correct it. I think the best way of having a good mental image of how the sound should be is listening to your heroes. Listen to their phrasing, listen to their lines, and listen to how they sound. Think about why do they sound like this. Find the exact reasons why they are doing this and how they are doing this, and really try to mimic their sound, their phrasing. Play their solos with the intensity they play and copy every aspect of their playing. When you have learned the notes of your musical heroes' lines and have a good idea how they sound, start playing along with their solos and really bite into how they phrase their lines. So what I learned way too late is playing the notes and playing the phrases should be one and the same thing. Play slow and hear the music before you play it. Getting the automated good phrasing into your playing will save you hours and hours of practicing bad sounding lines. And this brings us into the second thing I would have loved to learn earlier. When I hear Chris Potter's articulation, I'm really impressed by the strength and clarity of it. Let's start out defining what articulation actually do for us. When I leave out articulation or tonguing in a phrase, it totally loses the punch. So now try to play the same phrase with clear articulation. You immediately hear that punch back in the line. There are 2 clear things you really want to remember when you're working with articulation: phrasing and continuation. So why do I mix phrasing into articulation, and what is continuation? Articulation is very much related to phrasing because without the articulation, the phrasing does not pop. It really sounds dull and it doesn't have the same effect without the articulation. So what do I mean by continuation? Try play some phrases without articulation. Play them with a fully open airstream. When I do this, I feel that my fingers are much easier to move and the lines kind of play themselves, just moving my fingers along. It feels like an open freeway. Just play it. Maybe it sounds a little bit far out, but the sound actually connects the notes. So what comes first, the notes or the sound? Just think about it. Make the sound float on the airstream and then add the notes. Sounds much easier. Play the lick again, but first add the airstream and the sound in your head. Then play the full lick with clear articulation. Play slow to make it all work together. You'll start to hear that the notes, the fingers, the articulation and the phrasing becomes one thing. How Chris Potter is playing some clear, delicate phrases with a lot of articulation. No weird stops in the line, only clear articulation and clear phrasing with a steady airstream and a good sound. Again, I must admit that until recently I did not become fully aware that everything in the music aspect is one thing. Fingers, notes, articulation and phrasing. I promise you, when you start understanding and implementing this into your music, every aspect in music will become so much easier. Michael Brecker opened up my eyes to the third thing on my list. Some time ago I received this Michael Brecker book and this really opened my eyes. If you're a bit advanced in your playing, I can only recommend you to get this book from Share Music. The link is in the description. So I'm checking out this book and this sentence makes me stop up and look twice. This might be the biggest eye-opener I had in music lately, and it makes perfect sense. The timing is primarily in your fingers. Try out this exercise. I put the metronome on 2 and 4 in tempo 112 and I'm playing the major scale descending in thirds. Training this played with clear articulation. Now play it again and put your focus only on how your fingers move. When I did this, I discovered how much effort and how much focus I actually put into articulation and not into the timing of my fingers. So the next question is very individual. How much effort do you actually need to put into your fingers to keep the execution and the timing super clean and tight? What helps me execute this exercise very tight is putting a lot of force into my fingers. Hit the saxophone with your fingers like they're small drumsticks. Focus only on the timing of your fingers. And now you see how my fingers are pretty tight and move really fast onto the saxophone. Now I'm playing the exercise with no articulation, only blowing air through the horn and moving my fingers. So flowing on the airstream. When you have played this exercise with no articulation a couple of times, try add the articulation. What changed in your focus? And do you still need the same amount of focus on your fingers or your articulation? And here's a challenge for you. Do the same thing a half step up. Play the exercise in F sharp major. This will really show how your fingers needs to be trained. First without articulation, solely playing with your fingers. Then add articulation when ready. Really fast you get used to playing with tight fingers and the articulation just comes on top of that. When phrasing, articulation and timing becomes a natural part of your playing and you integrate this into your practice, all practice and all playings become so much easier. I admire all the great saxophone heroes. When I listen to these, I get inspired and motivated to try to play even better. And this is why I want to recommend you this video with Charlie Parker, John Coltrane and Michael Brecker. Look into 5 of the things that make these players great. Play music. Have fun.